Today it's why your guitar technique sucks, 8 mistakes you're making and how to fix them. Hello and welcome to another video with me, Elmo Karjalainen. It's good to have you along. Today we're gonna fix some mistakes you might be making on the guitar in terms of technique. Let's jump right to it. Imagine your fretting hand being half the size it is. You might have trouble reaching to places. Well, some people actually make their fretting hand kind of half the size it is. How? Thumb position. Some people have their thumb kind of like this. That means you'll have terrible trouble reaching anything on the neck. How do you fix this? Holding the thumb more kind of in the same direction as the frets go. Now what you're playing is gonna influence how you're gonna hold your thumb. So if you're playing chords, you might have your thumb slightly more over. If you're playing single note lines, especially on the lower strings, you're gonna have your thumb lower down here. So for chords, more like this, single note lines, more like this. But that's something to experiment with. If you want a good exercise to use to fix this, it's what I recommend all beginners start with. It's this song. If you don't know that song, that's Peter Gunn theme. It's all on the low E string, 0, 0, 2, 0, 3, 0, 5, 4, and repeat. That's it. Pay attention to where your thumb is, because that will give you a much wider reach on the guitar. Most of your issues having to do with reach are not to do with the size of your hand, it's to do more with how you're holding your hand, how you're holding the neck. Number 2. The guitar has 6 strings, but most often we're not playing all of the strings. Like if we play E or E minor, then we are. But in most cases we are not. So what do you do about the strings that you're not playing? Because you don't, let's say, you know this song. You don't want it to sound like this. You mute the strings. There are 2 ways to mute. Basically, you have muting with the fretting hand and muting with your picking hand. First way of muting, you can experiment with this, is just with the picking hand, kind of moving it about a bit, experimenting. But in terms of what I just played, Smells Like Teen Spirit, it's all to do with your fretting hand. And take the first power chord, the F. You fret the first fret on the E string, third on the A string, and nothing else is playing. And this is how I do it. I rest my index finger ever so slightly on the rest of the strings, and the same with the pinky. So what I get is this. That makes no difference when you're playing the 1 and 3, this. What this means is you don't have to look at what you're doing here. You can just you can look at your audience, or you can look at your fretting hand. Then you move it to the next strings, and in that case you get the low E string, which has nothing. The way I do this is that I take my index finger and I lightly rest it on, touch the low E string, so I get, again, in the context of playing that riff, it makes no difference if that's the sound you're making. That's it, muting. Also, you can play something like same idea. There's tons of riffs you can use to practice this. I really dislike that song. Number 3. Most of us, when playing rock and roll, use one of these. It's a pick. It's no good to anyone if it's lying over there. That's the Yngwie Malmsteen style of using picks. You need to hold your pick in a certain way. The way I do it is like I have kind of my hand like this, and I put my pick kind of like that, and my thumb like so. The idea is to have your pick in a firm but relaxed grip. So you don't have to have too much of it sticking out, but enough that you can actually pick something. You don't want to have your hand doing this. You just want to kind of nice relaxed thing going on here. And this is basically the same for everything I do, regardless of if it's fast or the funky stuff would do without the delay. But regardless, the way I hold the pick is pretty much the same. Now, the way I hold the pick, it's not, you don't have to do it like that. I've seen loads of people doing it differently. But the thing is, it has to be firm but relaxed so you don't drop it. Number 4. There's a line from The Man in the Naked Gun movies that kind of sums this up.
Like a blind man at an orgy, I was going to have to feel things out.
What happens if you're playing, I mean, some stuff you have to play like, but a lot of the stuff, most of the stuff, at least I play, I need a point of reference so that I don't have to go around looking at my right hand while I play, because that would just, often that would mean I have to look here, and I have 2 eyes, but I'm not that talented. I can do that because I have a point of reference, because I'm anchoring my right hand on the bridge. And I can experiment with how much I want it to be on the strings or how little. And that's one mistake people make. They hold their hand somewhere really weirdly, maybe here. Frank Zappa did this, kind of. And it might be that they move their whole hand when they're picking. Eddie Van Halen had this weird, this kind of motion when he tremolo picked, but he didn't really play fast picking lines as such. It was more legato stuff and that kind of thing. It worked for him. Definitely not bashing Eddie Van Halen. For a lot of things, anchoring your hand here gives you a point of reference. You kind of learn without looking which string you're playing, even though you have everything turned off. It's really good. Number 5. That kind of sound. Why do we get that sound? It's because we're pressing too close to the previous fret. So if we're playing fret 3, we're plething. We all plething. So we're pressing too close to the 2nd fret when we should be closer to the 3rd fret. And it doesn't take a lot of power to press when you press in the right place. If you want to practice this, there's a good one, the spider exercise, which is good for a lot of other things as well. See to it that you get every note clear as the light of day. Ringing out like a newborn baby robin. Now, in terms of that previous exercise, you could do another one. What happens when you move around a lot versus when you move around a little? When you move around a little, you conserve energy. When you move around a lot, you use up a lot of energy. So one of the problems I see is, for instance, with this exercise, if we're playing, the way I've noticed that I do this, something like that. So I play the first note, then I play the second note, but my first finger still stays firmly put. Then when I play the third note, my first finger starts lifting, but it doesn't lift too much. This is probably the maximum. My pinky waves around too much. I've noticed that. That could be corrected, but yeah. But what I see is some people doing this. So their fingers lift really far off the fretboard, and there's no need for that. Just try to stick close to the fretboard. As you can see, my pinky waves around too much. So it's a case of do as I say, don't do as I do. Number 7. Now we're getting into your signature territory. What's the difference between this? Whoops. Whoops. And this. Or. And. One is, well, there are a few different things, but everything comes from the first example, me bending with my fingers, versus me bending with my whole arm. So I basically lock my fingers. They don't do any of the heavy lifting. Instead, it's all kind of a hinge movement. So I have my hand anchored here and do this kind of a movement with my hand. If you want to practice this, you can do the old Paul Gilbert. He suggested this. It's not his lick. Much more difficult to do. And pay attention to your thumb, going back to number 1. If you have it here, you get a lot more power and control. And the last one, number 8. Number 8 is, well, what is your signature as a guitar player if you're playing leads? I don't mean the city. You're over in Yorkshire. I don't do the Yorkshire accent. Or I could rephrase it. What's the difference between a piano player and a guitar player? Bending notes, vibrato. So the real problem I see even really otherwise good guitar players have is that they forget about their vibrato. It's their most, I think it's your most important thing coupled with bends when you're playing lead lines. So I see people doing all kinds of stuff like and then they do this. Or just ignore it completely. And they've practiced all the technique stuff and everything sounds like, wow, how can he play so fast? And the vibrato is horrible. That's where you need, that's what you need to sort out. Practice it, record yourself, listen to what you're doing and go, I don't like that, or I like that. Listen to other guitar players and figure out what kind of vibrato do you want, because there are loads of variations and whatever you like is fine, but you cannot ignore this. Absolutely. If you ignore this, I feel sorry for you. And it can be something like if you want to do that, brilliant, do that. If you want to do the Steve Vai circular kind of motion, do that. But one other thing is practice this with a metronome or to a backing track of some sort, because you also want it to be in time, not random. You want it to be even and in time, because that's much nicer. Unless you want it to be out of time, because what do I know? You might want it to be out of time. So those are 8 mistakes you're making in terms of technique. I might have missed some. Let me know in the comments if I did. Also let me know if you enjoyed this video. I do hope you consider supporting the channel via one of the links in the description. There are affiliate links where you can buy stuff at no extra cost to you, which supports the channel. There's Patreon where you get access to my music lessons and a bunch of exclusives, and there's Bandcamp where you can buy my music if you don't want to fiddle around with Patreon. I hope you had some use of this video and enjoyed it, and above all, I hope you have a nice day. Take care. See you. Bye.